Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is where we take your source material books, research, notes, you name it, and we really get to the heart of the insight.
And today, we're doing something a little different. We're not looking at a huge historical text or a dense scientific paper.
No, we're zooming in. We're focusing on one single, really powerful chapter from a book called The Legend Mind, Zero to Infinity, by the SKR, who is also known as Sonu Kumar.
And the chapter title alone, well, it tells you everything you need to know about the ambition of this book.
It really does. Our mission today is to unpack a title that sounds, frankly, almost impossible. It's a radical demand for your own internal power. Forgive like a god.
Right. And that title immediately sets the stage, doesn't it? I mean, forgiveness, in most conversations, it's presented as this sort of soft virtue or, a necessary but difficult emotional process.
A healing journey, something like that.
Exactly. But the SKR, he completely reframes it. For him, it's a high-leverage skill. It's almost a form of spiritual and mental warfare against the pain you impose on yourself. He's asking you, the listener, for a total shift in perspective.
A shift that requires not just emotion, but strategy.
Strategy is the perfect word for it. And before you even get to the how-to of forgiveness, you have to understand the world he builds around it. It's this unique, intensely structured philosophy.
It really is. It's built on this bedrock of, I'd say, spiritual intensity and just immense personal ambition.
Absolutely. And everything he teaches is framed by this repetitive mantra you see throughout the book. Jaigrudde.
Jaigrudde.
It's a constant invocation. He's always calling on the teacher, the guide. It reinforces that this isn't just a casual read. It's a journey toward mastery.
It signals to you right from the start that you're entering a very structured system, a system for self-transformation.
And that structure is immediately visible in how he defines the person who's on this journey. He defines the term LEGEND through this really profound acronym.
Let's break that down. LEGEND stands for legacy, even God end, not demons.
Legacy, even God end, not demons.
I mean, that just raises the stakes beyond any self-help book I've ever read. This isn't about, managing your daily stress.
Not at all. It's about achieving a state of immortal legacy, a state where even divinity, even God-D doesn't end your journey, and the demons, your internal roadblocks, your external ones, they're completely neutralized.
You're aiming for zero, for nothing.
And he grounds that huge ambition in spirituality. You see it in the dedication of the book, which is to his immortal guru, the Lord Shiva.
So he's signaling that the wisdom, the techniques, they're all rooted in these primordial spiritual archetypes.
He's telling you that these modern-sounding techniques he's sharing are actually tools to achieve a very ancient, very profound state of being, a life of zero attraction to the world, which, fascinatingly, he says he actively pursued after observing the God role on television.
That brings us to the book's overall mission, which he lays out right in the preface. He calls the book the eye-opening for anyone who wants to do great work in their life.
But it's the method he uses to open that eye that's so unique. That's where this interdisciplinary approach comes in.
It's an overwhelming synthesis of ideas, but it feels completely intentional.
Oh, it is. The author admits he follows an interdisciplinary approach just to answer his own curious questions. He's pulling from science, math, religious texts, idioms, physics, numerology, cosmology, geography.
He's building this comprehensive worldview, what he calls a legend mind, to support this radical idea that you can master basically anything if you apply a system to it.
And that's the crucial point for us today. The complexity is there for a reason. It's designed to support the claim that this kind of radical self-improvement is possible. It's almost, in his view, scientifically mandated.
So for you listening, our mission is to cut through that complexity. We are breaking down Chapter 12 line by line to understand exactly how this highly structured philosophy applies the concept of forgiveness.
We want to see how he moves it from being a soft, emotional act into a sharp, tactical mastery, a tool that secures your internal freedom.
Okay, so let's unpack this idea of mastery by looking at where Chapter 12 actually sits inside the architecture of the legend mind.
It's important context.
Yeah.
The book is broken into 4 distinct units. They cover everything from basic self-improvement in Unit 0 to, these big cosmological questions in Unit 2.
But Chapter 12, Forgive Like a God, is placed squarely in Unit 1. And Unit 1 is called 10 Shades of the Legend.
And Unit 1 is really the instruction manual for integration. It's where the high-level philosophy starts to meet the practical reality of living in the world, of taking on social roles.
He says this unit is about the legend 10 characters that they live from childhood to present time.
Right. The author essentially treated human behavior like a laboratory. He identified the central, most essential activity of these key roles he saw in society.
And when you look at the shades he chose, it really clarifies the mindset he's trying to build. They correspond to roles like view like a kid's, think like a monk's, listen like a leader, speak like a politician, and live like a king.
These aren't just, personality traits.
No, they're professional skill sets.
Exactly. And the profound insight is that the legend, the character in the book, observed these roles. He says he saw all of them in real life, except for the God role, which he saw on television.
And from each one, he picked out the central activity of these 10 professions.
And then he integrated those activities into his personal life, but only after following the foundational principles of self-improvement that he lays out in Unit 0.
This means forgiveness is being categorized right alongside things like strategic communication and focused devotion.
That's a huge point. It's not an afterthought. It's not a nice to have. It is a central professional skill that must be acquired, just like learning to lead with authority or communicate strategically.
The ultimate goal of Unit 1 is to teach anyone how to master a different profession in one life.
And the connection here, the synthesis, is so key to understanding this godlike standard he sets. To forgive like a god, you actually have to incorporate several of the other shades.
How so?
Well, think about it. It requires the detachment of the monk, right? The person who achieves zero attraction to the world. It also requires the authority of the king, who governs his own domain, his own mind.
And I'd even say the strategy of the politician, who knows how to optimize relationships, even the relationship with yourself, for a larger goal.
Precisely. So if you're holding a grudge, you're not just being emotional in this framework. You are failing in your role as king, as monk, and as strategist.
You are sacrificing mastery for a momentary grievance. It makes forgiveness a non-negotiable part of becoming a legend.
And tying all of this mastery together is the concept of time. The author emphasizes giving critical importance to time, which he says is another form of supreme guru in Mega Universe.
That framing is crucial. It immediately reframes resentment as, the single greatest waste product of the human mind.
That's a perfect way to put it. It's a radical demand, treating every single minute as sacred. So how does holding a grudge actively sabotage that sacred time, specifically in the context of the legend mind?
Well, resentment is just looping footage of the past, isn't it? It forces your attention, your most valuable resource, your supreme guru, as he calls it, to just dwell on an event you cannot change.
Every minute you spend replaying the injury or fantasizing about justice or what you should have said.
It's a minute stolen from creative work, from leadership, from the self-improvement that Unit 0 demands. It's an active tax on the legend's life.
Right. If you want to master 10 professions in one life, you literally cannot afford to spend your time fighting a battle that is already over.
So Chapter 12, Forgive Like a God, becomes the tool. It's the tool designed to immediately stop the bleeding of this precious resource. It places the mastery of internal peace right up there with political power and intellectual leadership.
Okay, so let's transition from the structure into the core definition that's presented in Chapter 12. This is where the author clarifies what this mastery actually looks like.
And the introductory paragraph gets right to it. It states that to truly forgive like a god for your own personal development, it has to be viewed less as single act and more as a profound shift in perspective.
That is the turning point, isn't it? This is the moment where the camera cinematically focuses in on the protagonist's internal struggle. We are moving past the momentary transaction, the apology, the attempt to patch things up.
And we're moving into a complete remodeling of your internal landscape.
Yes. And this shift, he says, is centered on one thing: letting go of the need for revenge or justice.
Which challenges a core human instinct. I mean, when we're wronged, that desire for balance, for the offender to get what they deserve, it's potent. It feels right. It feels like closure.
Of course, but the legend mind demands that instead of seeking that external retribution, you choose peace and freedom form for yourself.
The emphasis is entirely on your internal liberation, not on the external balancing of the scales.
So if I'm holding on to the idea of justice, I'm essentially tethering my well-being to some future event that might never even happen.
An event which is an external outcome, completely controlled by the other person or just by fate.
And the author is saying, cancel the debt you are holding. That's the emotional leash that's dragging you around.
You're basically giving the offender veto power over your happiness every single day that you wait for them to pay that debt.
Precisely. And the moment you decide to forgive like a god, you withdraw that power. It becomes an act of radical self-preservation.
And the author is so clear about the nuance needed for this kind of high-level detachment. The process isn't about condoning what was done.
No, you can maintain the truth that the action was wrong, but the emotional grip, that has to be severed.
Let's look at this in that cinematic way we talked about. Imagine a scene where the antagonist is still speaking. They're still trying to inflict harm with their words.
But the protagonist has muted the sound.
Exactly. The words are still being spoken, the action still happened in the past, but the impact on the protagonist's internal reality is zero.
That clinical detachment is what the author requires.
This establishes forgiveness as the ultimate reclamation of your own sovereignty. It's specifically about detaching your well-being from the actions of others.
If you allow someone else's mistake or their malice to dictate your emotional reality day after day, week after week,
You've handed over the keys to your internal kingdom.
forgiving like a god, in this context, is the ultimate exercise in mental dominion. You decide who or what rules your thoughts.
Okay, so to truly execute that profound shift, we first have to clear the field of some common emotional landmines.
Yes, the chapter does this so well. It meticulously dismantles 3 common misconceptions. Because if you confuse the internal act with some external requirement, the whole process, the whole pursuit of the legend mind, it just fails.
Let's take the time needed to really understand these distinctions, because this is where most people get derailed on their own path to freedom.
Okay, number 1, it's not forgetting. The author states plainly that forgiveness does not require you to erase the memory of the event.
Which, from a strategic perspective, just makes sense. If you've been harmed, your memory of the context, the person, the situation, that's critical data for future decision-making, for self-protection.
Right, and that's a relief, I think, for a lot of people, because often you feel guilty that you still remember the injury. You see that memory as proof that you haven't truly forgiven.
But the legend mind is more strategic than that.
Absolutely. The requirement isn't to forget. It's to remember the event while simultaneously releasing the negative emotion attached to it.
The memory has to become data, not damage.
That's the perfect phrase for it. Imagine that traumatic scene from your past. You were allowed to review the footage, to learn the lessons from it, but you are required to strip away the intense soundtrack of fear and anger and betrayal.
So the facts remain, but the visceral pain is gone.
The scar remains, and it informs your future actions. But the wound is no longer actively draining your energy. That turns memory into a tool for wisdom, not a mechanism for perpetual suffering.
Which leads directly to the second negation he talks about, too. It's not condoning.
And this is a massive stumbling block for people, especially people who want justice. They feel that letting go of their anger means they're implicitly validating what the wrongdoer did.
Yeah, it feels like saying it's okay. If I tell myself that what they did was wrong, but I choose peace anyway, it feels like I'm holding 2 contradictory ideas in my head. How does the legend mind reconcile that moral judgment with the emotional release?
The author provides the answer directly. Forgiving someone doesn't mean affirming what they did was okay. You maintain the truth, the action was wrong. You never ever compromise your moral integrity, but you let go of the pain it caused you. See the difference? The moral judgment is a constant and objective truth. The pain is a variable, a subjective burden that you choose to carry or you choose to discard.
It's the ultimate sort of adult, nuanced separation. It requires you to acknowledge I was hurt, what happened was unjust, and yet I am choosing not to sacrifice my present day to this past injustice.
It's an act of emotional triage. The survival of the self is prioritized over the maintenance of the grievance.
And that separation leads us to the third negation, which I think is probably the most critical distinction for achieving real freedom.
I agree. Number 3, it's not reconciliation.
Now, this is where the advice can feel almost ruthlessly cold, doesn't it? I mean, we are socialized to believe that forgiveness must lead to rebuilding a relationship.
We are. We think of them as a package deal. But what happens to the human connection if forgiveness is entirely an internal act?
The author is crystal clear on this. Forgiveness is an internal process, not a mutual agreement.
The status of the relationship is completely irrelevant to your internal state. If rebuilding that relationship would compromise your safety, your peace, your future, the legend simply doesn't do it.
So forgiveness is the complete self-executed act. You take your emotional liberation into your own hands, regardless of whether the offender ever repents or apologizes or even knows you've forgiven them.
And this is the moment of maximum sovereignty. By defining forgiveness this way, the author removes the offender's ability to hold your freedom hostage.
If you wait for them to offer reconciliation,
You give them the authority to decide when your suffering ends. The legend mind refuses to grant that authority. You become the sole architect of your own peace.
the choice to forgive is a declaration. It's you saying, I am free, and my freedom is not conditional on your presence or your repentance.
So this brings us to the really practical core of the chapter. This is where we need to spend the most time.
Right. If forgiveness is this profound shift, this mastery, then how do you actually train your mind to execute it?
And the author provides a very detailed 4-step protocol for adopting this godlike mindset for personal growth. This is the legend's method of psychological dominion.
These steps are designed to be followed in sequence, right? Moving from acknowledging the real impact of the pain all the way to a state of complete transcendence.
Exactly. And let's start with that necessary initial confrontation, which might feel a little counterintuitive to people who are just seeking peace.
Hashtag step one. Acknowledge the pain and anger.
The first step requires a kind of brutal, uncensored honesty. The requirement is being completely honest with yourself about the hurt.
You cannot forgive what you haven't fully recognized and sort of metabolized. If you minimize it or repress the pain, it just stays there. It's a ticking time bomb.
An unresolved debt buried deep within Unit Zero, as he'd say, and it's sabotaging all your future self-improvements.
So this is the essential psychological clearing. The action is allowing yourself to feel the anger, the sadness, the betrayal without judgment.
Which is so hard.
Yeah.
We often shame ourselves for feeling intense negative emotions. The legend mind says, open the valve. You have to allow that initial legitimate pain to surface completely before you can even begin the work of letting it go.
And the source material provides specific, actionable techniques for this validation stage. The first one is journaling, writing down everything you felt with no censoring.
What does no censoring really mean in this context? It means removing that self-editing filter.
You write the raw, toxic thoughts, the detailed fantasies of revenge, the precise flavor of the betrayal.
Yes. Get that chaotic, poisonous narrative out of your head where it's all internalized and put it onto a page where you can observe it as a separate object.
You're essentially taking an internal video feed of your trauma and projecting it onto an external screen.
And once that turmoil is externalized, the second technique comes into play. Acknowledge the injustice. Admitting to yourself that what happened was unfair.
This feels vital. It validates your feelings and it prevents that insidious denial stage.
Right. If you go straight to, I should be over this by now, you skip the necessary step of grief and validation. This step gives the pain its due respect. It says, yes, this was wrong. Yes, you deserved better.
And paradoxically, that act of full validation gives you the standing to choose to discard the pain later. You're not discarding the reality of the injury. You're discarding the suffering from the injury.
Hashtag step 2, detach from the narrative.
Okay, so once the pain is acknowledged, the focus has to shift immediately from the event itself to the story we build around it.
This is the moment where the camera pulls back and shows the entire set.
And the great challenge of this step is that the mind creates a story, often casting the self as the eternal victim, perpetually defined by what happened. To forgive, he says, you must separate yourself from this story.
This step tackles identity theft head-on. If you identify as the person who was wronged, you've given that injury a permanent central role in your life story.
And the author's command is clear, realizing your identity is not defined by the wrong that was done to you. The legend is an actor in a massive universe, and the legend's story is about creation and mastery, not reaction and injury.
So how do we execute this incredible shift in identity? Especially when that story feels so real, so justified.
The text offers two really powerful transformative techniques. The first one is to reframe the story. This means thinking about the other person's perspective, their struggles, their motives.
But that sounds incredibly difficult when you're still angry. It sounds a lot like you're just excusing them.
That's the subtlety the author addresses. The source is explicit about this. This is not an excuse for their behavior. It's a way to understand the human fallibility behind it.
You are pulling back to that God view, seeing the full scene. The offender is no longer some cartoon villain.
But a complex human being, likely operating from their own ignorance, their own pain, or their own limited awareness.
And when you recognize the offender as flawed and limited, they shrink. They go from being this powerful, deliberate enemy to just another imperfect human. Their power over your narrative instantly diminishes.
They move from being the center of your universe to being a small, flawed character in the periphery of your own legend story.
Exactly. And the second technique for detachment is crucial for self-sovereignty. Release the need for justice.
Oof. This means recognizing that resentment is basically a control fantasy. We hold on to it because we believe it keeps us morally superior or maybe ensures some future reckoning.
But since you can't change the past, you must let go of the need for them to apologize or for karma to get them.
That is maybe the most difficult directive in the whole chapter. We feel owed. We feel like we're upholding some kind of moral law by demanding justice.
And that demand is what traps you. The author identifies this control fantasy as self-sabotage. You are clinging to an illusion of control over an external, unchangeable event.
And the legend mind demands the ultimate realization here. Your peace is more valuable.
Letting go of that control fantasy, letting go of the need for external vindication, that is the prerequisite for achieving internal, stable peace. You choose peace over being right.
Hashtag step 3. Choose to release the emotional debt.
Okay, if the first two steps were about processing and shifting perspective, step 3 is the core action.
It is an active decision, not a passive hope. This is the moment of internal decree, the signing of the cancellation papers.
The central principle here is the ownership of the burden. You are the one holding the emotional debt, and he says you are the only one who can decide to cancel it.
So if you wait for time to heal you, or for the other person to apologize, you just remain paralyzed. The legend has to seize the active authority to declare that debt null and void.
We need to see this moment cinematically, right? It's a conscious, deliberate, and sometimes repetitive choice. It's not a feeling that just washes over you one day.
It's the moment the protagonist stops waiting for rescue and declares their own freedom.
And to facilitate this active decision, the chapter suggests two very practical techniques. The first is affirmation. Saying a statement to yourself like, I release this hurt, not because they deserve it, but because I deserve peace.
The power of the spoken word, whether it's internal or external, it reinforces the decision. It moves it from a fleeting wish to a binding decree within your own internal domain.
And the second technique pushes this concept into really powerful, actionable visualization. Visualization. We are asked to imagine the hurt as a heavy weight or a dark cloud.
Walk us through how the legend actively uses this technique to achieve that internal dominion. Let's really get into that movie-style instruction here.
Okay. Close your eyes. Imagine that injury, that emotional debt, as a specific, tangible object. Maybe it's a jagged, heavy stone lodged in your chest.
Or a chain wrapped around your ankle.
Or a dark, swirling cloud of corrosive resentment just hovering above you. You have to make it real in your mind's eye.
A heavyweight. Okay, I've got it.
You visualize yourself, the legend, physically letting go of it. You grab that heavy stone or that dark cloud, you pull it away from your body, and you actively command it to dissolve and float away, allowing it to disperse into the great dominion of the universe.
You see the chain breaking, the stone crumbling into dust, the cloud dissipating into the sky.
You are literally seeing the weight lift off your body. The mental image is so critical because it transforms this invisible, corrosive feeling of resentment into a tangible object that your conscious will can actually discard.
And this act has to be repeated, doesn't it?
It has to be. Every time the grievance tries to return, every time the memory tries to reattach that negative emotional soundtrack, you consciously, actively run the visualization sequence again. You see the debt dissolving.
This trains the mind to accept a cancellation. It proves the legend's ability to override deeply ingrained emotional programming just by choosing internal freedom.
Hashtag step 4. Cultivate compassion for yourself and others.
If step 3 was that powerful act of release, step 4 is about filling the void. You can't just release the pain. You have to replace it with something generative.
Yes. This step recognizes that forgiveness is, in the end, the ultimate gift you give to yourself. It's what frees you from the prison of resentment.
And this cultivation is a necessary two-part process. It begins with self-compassion. This is absolutely essential for the legend. You have to forgive yourself for any role you played.
Even if that role was just being vulnerable or making a mistake that led to the injury in the first place.
We are so often our own harshest critics, right? Beating ourselves up for not seeing the signs or for trusting the wrong person.
This step demands that we acknowledge our strength in overcoming the event, not our foolishness in entering it. It's the healing stage. You stabilize your own internal domain first.
And once that self-forgiveness is achieved, once you have compassion for your own inherent human fallibility, then you can move to the second part.
Universal compassion. This is the highest perspective, the true godlike view.
But how do we achieve this without, becoming a doormat?
It involves recognizing that every human is flawed. This isn't permission for bad behavior, it's just a truth about existence.
You are commanded to see the person who hurt you as a complex human being who is likely operating from their own pain. You see the full context.
By achieving this level of universal compassion, you move beyond the personal transaction. You start to view the event as just an unfortunate demonstration of human fallibility, theirs, and maybe yours, rather than a targeted, specific attack on your soul.
And this final step seals the deal. You have reclaimed your peace, divorced your identity from the injury, and established psychological dominion over your inner world.
So to really solidify these learnings, the chapter concludes with a very concise summary. It's like a manifesto designed for instant recall when you're in a moment of duress.
It boils that intensive 4-step process down to 4 key verbs that represent the Legends protocol.
These 4 verbs are designed to interrupt that reactive cycle of resentment.
So first, acknowledge. Feel the hurt without judgment. Don't deny the injury.
Second, detach. Separate yourself from the victim narrative. The event happened to you, but it is not who you are.
Third, release. Actively decide to let go of the emotional debt. You have to make the conscious choice.
And finally, cultivate. Find peace through compassion, both for your own vulnerable self and for the flawed humanity of the offender.
The power of this structure, I think, really emphasizes that practicing these steps means forgiving like a god isn't about being perfect.
No, it's not a mystical, out-of-reach state at all. It is a system for practical self-governance.
The true outcome is deeply pragmatic for the Legend Mind. It is about reclaiming your power and choosing to live in a state of freedom rather than a state of perpetual pain.
It moves you from being reactive to being the primary active agent in your own emotional life. You are the one who determines your internal weather.
And to provide the ultimate philosophical payoff, the author connects this personal liberation back to the concept he's asked us to emulate. We have to return to his specific definition of God that concludes the chapter.
He's so meticulous with his definitions. He uses these acronyms to give common words a new, deeper meaning within the context of the Legend Mind.
So he defines God as G, greatest, OFF-D equals dominion, universe.
Right, so when you synthesize this back into the philosophy of Legend Mind, God, the one who is greatest of whole dominion, that is universe.
It shifts the definition from a purely external spiritual force to a description of ultimate command.
And this is the ultimate connection back to the act of forgiving like a god. By systematically acknowledging the pain, detaching your identity from it, and actively releasing that emotional debt through visualization and conscious choice.
By achieving the mastery of compassion.
The legend is exercising supreme dominion over their internal universe. This act of forgiveness isn't merely moral or spiritual. It's a demonstration of internal governance and power. It proves you are the greatest authority within your own domain, regardless of the chaos of external circumstances.
And that is the final, profound shift the chapter offers, the path to becoming the ruler of your own experience. So the strategic takeaway here is pretty clear. Resentment is a luxury the Legend Mind simply cannot afford.
Not at all.
The whole idea that forgiveness is a core skill, one of the 10 shades of the legend, it suggests that adopting this perspective is a mastery in itself.
If you want to view, think, listen, speak, and lead with authority, you have to first master the art of detaching from pain.
That price, the constant draining of your finite time and energy on old wounds, is simply too high for anyone who's seeking greatness.
And that strategic detachment is what makes this concept so highly applicable to you, the listener. We are constantly faced with people, events, circumstances that try to define us by the wrong that was done.
And the chapter instructs us to immediately sever that link, prioritizing our peace above all else.
So as you integrate this, think about those 3 negations we spent time on. Not forgetting, not condoning, and not reconciliation.
Which of those 3 is the hardest for you to separate from forgiveness? Are you subconsciously requiring an apology or reconciliation before you grant yourself internal peace?
Identify the specific negation that's trapping you.
And then focus your personal growth exercise entirely on step 3, actively choosing to release the debt. If you find yourself holding on to a grievance, don't just wait for it to fade.
Commit to the visualization technique. See that injury, that emotional debt, as a specific, heavy, tangible object, and then actively, physically imagine yourself allowing it to dissolve and float away into the mega universe.
Make the decision real, because that active choice, that dominion over your inner state, is what proves you are the legend in your own life.